Two Viking warriors prepare for a raid across the North Sea. Same age, same diet, same years living and fighting in the same brutal climate. But there is one difference. One of them has been training the way modern fitness coaches prescribe. Long runs along the fjord every morning, sustained effort, building what we now call cardiovascular base. The other has never once run for distance. He rows, climbs, lifts, wrestles, throws, and fights. Short, violent, unpredictable bursts of total effort followed by rest. By modern standards, the runner should have superior endurance. His VO2 max is higher. His resting heart rate is lower. Every metric says he is the more conditioned athlete. Then the storm hits on day 3 of the crossing. 48 hours of continuous rowing against open water, hauling gear, bailing ice water, keeping the ship alive. No rhythm, no pace, no predictable demand. Just whatever the sea requires, for as long as it requires it. The runner's body, trained for one specific kind of sustained effort, begins to fail in ways he cannot explain. His energy is inconsistent. His muscles work when the demand matches his training and collapse when it doesn't. The other man never stops. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't genetics. This was the direct result of a physical philosophy the Norse called íþróttir. A system of training so far removed from anything modern, fitness recognizes that historians largely dismissed it as primitive. Walk into any gym today, and the prescription is the same everywhere you look. Build your aerobic base, log your miles, track your heart rate zones, stay in the fat-burning range. The Vikings would have had no idea what any of that meant. They trained for chaos. They built bodies that could do anything, not one thing well. And they produced a standard of functional endurance that modern special operations researchers are only now beginning to understand. So if you want to know how a civilization with no treadmills, no periodization programs, and no sports science produced some of the most physically capable humans who ever lived, stay with this. Because the answer will challenge everything the fitness industry has spent 50 years telling you about how endurance is actually built. Drop a comment. Do you train for one specific goal? Or do you train for everything? Tell us your approach below. The Norsemen documented their physical culture in the sagas and the Eddic texts with a specificity that surprises modern readers. The íþróttir were not recreational activities. They were a formal system of physical competencies every Norseman was expected to master. Swimming in open cold water, climbing sheer rock faces without rope, wrestling on unstable ground, ski traversal across mountain terrain, rowing against current for hours, throwing weighted objects for accuracy and distance, leaping between moving objects, lifting and carrying loads that no training program today would prescribe in the same session. What is conspicuously absent from every account of Norse physical training is sustained moderate-intensity effort performed at a steady state for the purpose of building cardiovascular fitness. They did not run for distance. They did not cycle. They had no concept of aerobic base work as a training priority. And yet the sagas describe men like Gunnar of Hlíðarendi, who could jump his own height in full armor, swim rivers in winter, fight multiple opponents without rest, and row through conditions that killed lesser men. These were not mythological exaggerations carved out of thin air. They were the documented standard of a man considered physically capable by Norse society. The question worth sitting with is not how they did it. The question is what they understood about the human body that we have spent decades training ourselves away from. If you are finding this video helpful, do well to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Here is what was happening inside the Viking body that they could not measure, but clearly built through generations of observation. Modern exercise science has spent years studying what researchers call concurrent training, the combination of strength and endurance demands within a single training system. For decades, the prevailing belief was that these two qualities competed with each other. That building maximal strength interfered with endurance development, and vice versa. Train for both, and you'd get mediocre results at both. Then researchers at the Norwegian School of Sports Sciences began examining a different question. What happens to the human body when it is never trained to specialize? When every training session mixes explosive power, sustained effort, load-bearing, and unpredictable demand without any of them being the primary goal? What they found contradicted 50 years of periodization theory. The body, when trained across multiple simultaneous physical demands, does not split its adaptive response and produce mediocrity across all of them. It builds a unified system that performs across all of them. Mitochondrial density increases. Fast-twitch fibers develop aerobic capacity without losing their power output. The cardiovascular system adapts not to one specific demand, but to variability itself. The technical term researchers now use is metabolic flexibility. The capacity of the body to shift fuel sources, manage oxygen debt, and sustain output across a range of intensities without degrading. It is the exact physiological opposite of what modern endurance training produces, which is a body finely tuned to perform within a narrow band and poorly equipped to perform outside it. The Vikings built metabolic flexibility not as a concept they understood intellectually, but as a practical outcome of training that never allowed the body to specialize. Every session demanded everything. The body had no choice but to become capable of everything. But what if the physical adaptation was only half of what the Norse system produced? Because here is what the sagas consistently document alongside physical capability, and what modern performance researchers are finding is inseparable from it. The Vikings had no concept of quitting as a neutral option. The Old Norse word nidingur, the most severe social condemnation available in Norse culture, described a man who refused to fight, abandoned his companions, or stopped when the work demanded continuing. There was no polite exit. There was no honorable surrender to discomfort. The cultural architecture around physical performance made stopping in the face of difficulty not just a personal failure, but a social one, permanently recorded and publicly named. What this produced psychologically is what modern performance researchers at the U.S. Naval Aerospace Medical Research Laboratory now call hardiness, a measurable cognitive trait characterized by commitment to effort regardless of discomfort, perceived control over outcomes, and the interpretation of challenge as something to be engaged rather than avoided. Studies on hardiness consistently show it is not a fixed personality trait. It is developed through repeated exposure to difficult conditions where quitting is not the practiced response. The Norsemen were not harder men by nature. They were harder men by design, because their physical culture never allowed them to build the neural pathway that modern training inadvertently reinforces with every rest day, every modified workout, every session cut short when the body complains. When you train the body to stop at discomfort, you train the mind to expect that stopping is an option. When you train the body to continue through discomfort consistently, you train the mind that discomfort is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that the work is beginning. This is what the íþróttir actually built. Not just muscle, not just cardiovascular efficiency. A nervous system wired to interpret physical hardship as normal and to continue functioning cleanly inside it. Modern research is reconstructing this understanding from a completely different direction. Studies published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research have confirmed that high-intensity, variable demand training produces equivalent or superior cardiovascular adaptations compared to traditional steady-state endurance work, in significantly less total training time. A 2022 meta-analysis from the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that concurrent training combining strength and high-intensity effort not only preserved cardiovascular fitness, but produced greater improvements in functional work capacity than aerobic training alone. Norwegian military researchers studying the physical demands of special operations found that the performance variable most predictive of success was not maximum strength, not VO2 max, and not any single measurable fitness metric. It was the capacity to maintain output across unpredictable, mixed-demand situations over extended time. They called it operational endurance. The Vikings had a word for it too. They just called it being capable. What the fitness industry will never tell you is that the cardiovascular base model, the idea that you must accumulate hours of steady-state aerobic work before your body can perform, was not derived from studying elite human performance across varied real-world demands. It was derived from studying specialized athletes in specialized sports and then applied universally as if those conditions were the same. They are not. The Vikings were not specialized athletes. They were generalists. And generalist training produces a different kind of body than anything modern programming is designed to build. Return to the open water on day 3 of the crossing. The man who had been running every morning was not weak. He was highly adapted to one specific physiological demand. The moment the sea stopped honoring that demand, his advantage disappeared. The man trained in the íþróttir did not have a higher VO2 max. He did not have superior genetics. What he had was a body that had never been taught to expect conditions to remain predictable, and a nervous system that had never been given permission to interpret difficulty as a reason to stop. He had metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch fuel sources, manage oxygen debt, and sustain output when the demand shifted without warning. He had psychological hardiness built through years of training that never allowed the comfortable exit. And he had functional strength so integrated into every physical demand that separating endurance from power was a distinction his body had never learned to make. The íþróttir produced endurance not by training endurance as an isolated quality. It produced endurance by building a body and a mind that were both prepared for whatever arrived. Not one thing perfectly, everything adequately. And in the real world, on real water, in real conditions, that is what survives. The secret was never a better cardiovascular program. It was the understanding that the body only adapts to what you consistently demand of it, and that a body trained to expect chaos becomes something that chaos cannot break. That is what the Vikings built. And it is what the fitness industry, in 50 years of specialization and optimization, has quietly trained out of us.